are the two medial surfaces which are vertically placed. And what is related to this medial longitudinal fissure? What is the structure which you have the pars cerebri. And then inferiorly, what structure inhibits from it to go further down? You have the corpus callosum, right? So other than this median longitudinal fissure, we also have a horizontal fissure, right? We also have a horizontal fissure, and this horizontal fissure is related to the tentorium cerebelli. So all of you know about the median longitudinal fissure, but there is also a horizontal fissure which is related to the tentorium cerebelli, which separates the cerebrum from this cerebellum, and anteriorly you have the midbrain. Okay. Now, when you look at the two hemispheres, you can identify the poles anteriorly projecting. You can see this is the frontal pole, and posteriorly you can see this is the occipital pole, and antero-inferiorly you can see projecting from the temporal lobe. This is the temporal pole. Alright. So instead of calling the anterior posterior poles, we call it as the frontal, the occipital, and the temporal poles. Now we have specific standards by which we demarcate these lobes. Alright, we demarcate the lobes like the frontal from the parietal. So we take the help of certain imaginary lines. Alright, the first landmark we use is the central sulcus. This is the central sulcus. You can see in this specimen, this is the central sulcus. Here you can see this is not exactly placed in the midline. It's not exactly placed in the center, as the name suggests. If it is central, it has to be at the midpoint. But this central sulcus is not placed exactly in the midpoint between the frontal and the occipital poles, whereas it is placed approximately 1.5 centimeters posterior to the midpoint. So, what is the other name for central sulcus? It's also known as the central sulcus of Rolando. It's known as the sulcus of Rolando. R-O-L-A-N-D-O. So, how do you identify the central sulcus? Medially, this central sulcus dips down, just indents, not completely. In some specimens you can see completely indenting, but it starts from the medial surface. You can see projecting a little bit on the medial surface. There you can see projecting a little bit towards the medial surface. It is placed approximately, this would be the approximate midpoint of this brain. It's placed around 1 to 1.5 centimeters behind the midpoint, and it traces infrolaterally along the supralateral surface, and here you can see it is projecting down, and it almost falls short of the lateral sulcus. This sulcus is this big sulcus. What you see, this is the lateral sulcus. So it does not completely intersect the lateral sulcus. It falls short a little bit down the line. So you can see it begins. This is the entire course of the. It takes around 2 winds in its course. Alright, and as it goes down, it just falls short to meet the lateral sulcus. So this is the central sulcus of Rolando. Alright, and what is the other sulcus? Here you can see this is the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. This whole thing you can see, this is the lateral sulcus. This is the stem of the lateral sulcus, which separates the frontal lobe from the temporal lobe. So it winds, curves. This is also known as the superciliary margin of it. It is also known as the superciliary border. So here you can see this is the stem of the lateral sulcus. Then it curves posteriorly along the supralateral surface between the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe, and this posterior continuity is known as the posterior ramus. There are other two rami, ascending and anterior. We are going to do it in detail when we are dealing with the gyri and sulci. Okay. So what is this? This is the so what do you see laterally? That's the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, whereas this portion is known as the stem of the sulcus. So the point where the central sulcus begins, and it's called shorts here, you can see the area in front of the central sulcus. This entire area is known as the frontal lobe. Alright, so between the central sulcus and in front and the area above the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, that area is known as the frontal lobe. Alright, then we take two imaginary lines. Look at this. This is the occipital pole. Can you see? This is the occipital pole. This is the frontal pole. Now here, along this inferior surface, you can see this notch. This is approximately 5 centimeters in front of the occipital pole. This is known as the pre-occipital notch. And how is it produced? It is produced because of that thick petrous part of the temporal bone. When this is placed in the cranial fossa, the petrous temporal bone, which is there in the middle cranial fossa, it indents and it rests against this surface to produce this pre-occipital notch. It's approximately 5 centimeters pre-occipital notch. The petrous part of the temporal bone. So this is the pre-occipital notch. Then we have another imaginary line.